There we go. So let's just start with information about what we're here to do. So this course is misattributed at different times. There's a quote misattributed at different times to Miles Davis, Frank Zappa, David Bryan, Laurie Anderson, and others, states that writing about music is like dancing about architecture. This is a maximum provocation against music critics who would try to express musical sentiments in language as if they could casually translate them through their worlds. Although the quote hides a romantic notion of the ineffability of musical aesthetics, it is fair in its contestation of the current paradigm of music writing, which either implies easy transparency in the conversion of sonic impressions or relies on a cold, technical, supposedly rational interpretation of music by way of notational parameters. It also acknowledges the first lesson of art criticism, that writing is a form of literature, an art form of its own, like any other, to which the critic needs to submit different artworks. Thus, music criticism would be, first of all, a literary practice. The main fault of the maxim is not the music is easy to translate, but instead that the difficulty in translating itself can be potentially productive. This workshop will provide practical training on how to write effectively and synthetically about music. In particular, we will address pop music, which lacks the common imaginative vocabulary of abstractions, and we will use forms of communication that are amicable to current day social media, which, contrary to traditional publishing, are ever relevant. Exercise will include short reviews, one-liners, video commentaries, and a longer essay from the online pitch to the final editing process. The main takeaway from this workshop should be the deeper engagement with listening and clarification of one's taste and its translation into text. Why do you like or dislike a song that has been just released? How do you how do you transmit the images and feeling it evokes in you to a wider audience without alienating either the musically trained or the totally dilettante? Lastly, how can music writing allow us to better understand the openings between art forms, between media, and between people? Session 1 is Introduction to Music Writing. We will introduce the bulk of the seminar and its schedule and assignments and talk about comparative aesthetics and the phenomenology of the musical work of how to effectively translate between art forms. Session 2 is Short Review. We will read and edit outputs to your first assignment, short review, and compare them with examples of great music writers to understand how music reviews are usually structured and how creative writing techniques can play into it. Session 3, one-liners. We will read and edit the outputs of your second assignment, one-liners, and discuss the conditions of critique and judgment of a piece of music, as well as learn to synthesize complex ideas into punchy, forthright, and often humorous or dramatic phrases. Session 4 is video commentary. We will watch and discuss the outputs of your third assignment, video commentary, and discuss the role of music criticism in the current landscape of low attention span, influencer-dominated social media, or how one may or may not become a music writer in the practical sense, attentive to the how freelancing markets work. Our session room. I'm going to read the instructor bio. The instructor is Romulo Moraes, is a Brazilian writer, sound artist, and ethnography PhD candidate in ethnomusicology at City University of New York. With a Fulbright Cape Scholarship, he holds a master's in culture and communication from ECO UFJ RJ. He's the author of Casuales Kotze 2019 and has worked and taught in the New Center for Research and Practice. Currently, he's interested in phenomenologies of imagination, post-mediatic maximalism, the entwinement of pop and experimental, and the cosmopoetics of crate digging.
All right, thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, the bio is very outdated. At some places published later, but that's fine. And the course, the session structure also changed that a little bit to like facilitate a different sort of arrangement. You'll see that when I kind of go over some slides today later on. But before we start, I'd just like you guys, everyone, to kind of introduce themselves a little bit. You know the deal. You've done other classes, I suppose. So I just like you to, tell me, what your background is briefly, a sentence or two, what you guys like to study, and also like maybe why you're doing this course and what kind of music you enjoy as well. Like so that's also important for me to not only kind of calibrate the workshop towards your interests, but also to understand your personality, right? Like I've said the previous class, music taste is the most important aspect of a personality. So no pressure on that. So just tell me what your whole personality is in a single in a couple of artists. No, I mean, just yeah, just give me a map for your soul. Um, can we start with uh Thomas? Who, yeah, I think you're the first here, but also the person I know the least from here, right?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Tomás. I am from Colombia. This is my second class I am attending to the new school. And yeah, I'm very excited for this class. I am an architect, and also I have been working in project management and smart cities. And I am very interested in this particular class because yeah, I love music, especially experimental electronic music, and yeah, I am very excited to learn about
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Thank you. Cool. You didn't tell me music though, but we'll get to that. I think you published it. I mean, in your outputs, we can kind of sense that, I guess, right? Um, and yeah, I think this class is just as much as about architecture as, as about music. You'll see it's very the description of music very quickly becomes topological, and sort of a construction of an actual construction in terms of like a building construction, right? Um, okay, so that's good. Senza.
Hi, how are you? Hope everyone's doing well. Um, I'm Sansa. I'm from Ecuador, right now in Colombia. I'm a certificate student here at the new center, and I've been waiting for this workshop for a minute now. And I'm sorry, what was the rest of the question? The sort of music. Oh, what I'm into? Oh, well, as part of the new center and the things that I'm into, I'm trying to delve myself into researching nonverbal outputs, which implies things which are not necessarily verbal, to be redundant about it, like war, perfumes, religion, and music, among many other things. I do see a correlation among all of those sort of topics or fields of human
Okay.
experience. And I also dedicate myself to a lot of music endeavors. I do shows and booking and tours for many bands, for bands that I play with around the continent. And whether I like it or not, I've been pretty much defined at a musical level by like punk, hardcore, and emo music.
Okay.
Unfortunately, though, I must say at this point in life. But yeah,
Hey,
that's what I'm into.
you shouldn't say that. All of that kind of, even if we were embarrassed about their previous days, I think there's some silver lining about all of them. They turn this into like specific. They create a specificity for our tastes, which is very important. I do like the list of things you created, the correlations and stuff. Important. What else was I gonna say? Oh, I thought of something that was useful, but okay, I forgot. If I remember again, I'll say it. But I was gonna say something. Okay, that's fine. So two people, one in Ecuador, but you're in Colombia, right? Um, do you know music theory? That's important too. Like if you guys know
Yeah.
that, only because then you would need a little bit more of a twisting and being broken apart. Um, and you should, the more the more you know about music theory, the harder it tends to be for you to become a proper music writer. Um,
Yeah, I suppose, but I do know a lot of. I studied classical music for
okay.
like 10 years of my life, and
Yeah.
I've kept doing more left field efforts regarding secular music that does punk, hardcore, and emo. But yeah, I did study. I know how to play the violin and stuff and read music.
Okay, okay, that's nice. Yeah, and you mentioned the workshop took a while. Yes, it changed a bit. Like, I don't know, it was announced about a year ago, and then it was going to be in the previous semester, and then it changed to this semester, and then it was pushed a little bit further, more afterwards from various private reasons. But I'm glad we've been, I mean, be able to do it now, and with you guys and the selection of people that I think is, are interesting. Um, but we did miss a lot of people. Like a lot of people registered for the first class, like for when the class was first assigned, and then there was still, there's kind of like this back and forth. Um, but that's fine, that's fine. Clara.
Hi everyone, I'm Clara. I'm currently based in Prague, where I'm basically doing Academy of Fine Arts. And why I applied for this course? Well, when I was like signing up for the courses, I was thinking about I had this like period in my high school actually, a long time ago, whatever. And I was writing a lot about music. Whatever just came to my mind and whatever I was listening, not like a concrete genre of music. But then it came to a point where I think that I was kind of copying Pitchfork, in every possible way. Um, and it was like a blog, so it was for me it was easy because like I had the complete freedom of what I can write down, and my thoughts weren't censored in any way. So, but anyway, the feedback that I was getting came to a point of like, you're copying Pitchfork, like stop doing that. Which I think was like true. I was doing that, and then I kind of stopped because I felt like I cannot push it any further into any direction. So anyway, now I applied for this course, and I want to maybe write again, but in a different way. I'm still figuring it out. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. But you mean you're copying Pitchfork in terms of your taste? Like your taste, was it similar, or the writing of it?
I think writing. And
Writing.
also like Pitchfork has this like a specific type of evaluation, right? Like they
Yeah.
put 7.8 out of 10, and I was
Yeah.
doing the same thing. Um,
Oh,
but
that's
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's very specific for Pitchfork. I think nobody else does it. So
Yeah.
then,
I see. Yeah, yeah, it's very to the decimal, right? Which is interesting. I think we'll talk about that today, later after we review the assignments. Um, but yeah, Pitchfork is really influential to the kind of like current kind of imagination of what music criticism is. Um, Before it was kind of like the Village Voice, which was another kind of US based young, hippish kind of audience, which is like tastemakers, I guess. They go on and off, but it's also, you mentioned being writing it as, as you're young. I think music writing tends to be the escape valve for a lot of very young writers, or like a sort of a portal into writing itself for a lot of people, because you tend to like a lot of music when you're young, you tend to be open to a lot of different music when you're young, and also it tends to be the kind of writing that allows you to do a lot. It's very malleable, um and it's very like the entry barrier is very low. So poetry is like that as well, right? Anyone can do it. So just if you will yourself into doing it, you're doing it now, right? And 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 music writing is kind of like that too. As long as you don't take yourself very seriously, you have a little bit of a self-confidence on what you're doing. You kind of like trust your intuition a little bit. You become kind of start writing a little bit about music, right? So I know a lot of people that wrote about music and gave up, or that thought like they wrote about music just as a hobby, which is interesting too, as a thing to do, right? Um, and I'm curious about, yeah, if you want to go back into music writing, what sort of format can that take, right? It can take other formats. It doesn't need to be Pitchfork anymore. Although, the new formats that we have, someone mentioned Anthony Fantano here. Yeah, that's another like standard format that everyone's trying to imitate, I guess. But we can think of other, ways out. We can try to think about it together. Emmy,
Hello, everyone. I am Eme from Medellin, Colombia. I am a songwriter, producer, more like a programmer than kind of classically trained, more than more from Ableton Live than notation and those kind of things. I had also my bands of emo and screamo years ago, and then I moved to like solitary composing electronic music, ambient, and sound art. I explored sound art several years. And in the last 5 years or so, I've been more into local sounds from here from Medellin, like cumbia, reggaeton, like Latin pop, also trying to play with that and experiment with that. And I am kind of linking that with my work here at the New Center. I am exploring this idea of Cheje from Silvia Rivera Cusicanqui, who is a theorist from Bolivia. And I am relating that to sound and Latin identity in music, specifically working from the ideas of Kodo Eshun, who has been like one of the main authors in my adventure through writing sound. I am also like I kind of I consider myself a disciple of David Toop as well. I like a lot of David Toop, and I remember Ocean of Sound as like one of my first music kind of writing that stands out from the review kind of thing, and I have moved in that line of the CCRU and all these sonic fiction ideas. Code 9, it's another author I really like, and I am moving towards this kind of theories and applying that to my own practice.
Okay, cool. Yeah, very cool. David Toops, that book's great. Code 9 has he taught at the New Center one guest session, I think. If you look it up, on like a guest seminar that Jacob, what's his name? Jacob something had on like sound art. He was one of the guests. It was interesting. Koduo Eshun was also very interesting. I think one of the most interesting, maybe the most interesting people at CCRU for me, although he hasn't written much right after More Brilliant Than the Sun. That book is very interesting and but it's also like very non-linear in a way. Like I always give it to my students in the classes I teach, and I don't give them pages. I just go like, you can skim randomly, find some excerpts that you like. It's like an oracle in a sense. It's kind of like you can start from every point. Very interesting book. Um, as a piece of theory, as a piece of sound, like music criticism, and as a piece of like fiction as well. And it's one example I think of, how we can imagine new forms of music writing to become, right? And you mentioned you were like a producer, right? I always feel like producers are very shy of saying they're musicians when you don't play an instrument and stuff. I'm kind of like that too, kind of like I play a piano, but not very, very well. And not compared to like people that are doing PhDs in piano and stuff, but I do produce stuff. But I'm always like, oh, I'm a musician, but not really. I just do this stuff on the computer. Sounds come off of it. Um, but it is a form of this music making is all the same. It's just that we're so tied to this classical idea of what a musician is, and you need to learn the instrument, and you need to have these gestures that are mechanical in your body and stuff. Um, but that's all gone. You don't need that anymore, right? You can just call yourself, or call yourself a sound artist or whatever. That's probably better, but don't be shy about it. And it's interesting you said like you moved on from emo and screamo because you became more solitary, I guess. Like, because I do feel about like how a lot of the times the stuff that we like, the music that we like, and the music that we make are also like shaped by these modes of collaboration or different modes of relating to others that we have available to us. Right. So maybe when you were a kid, you liked, I liked, that's the case with me, for example, I like more like band related stuff, like guitar music, because I could do it with my friends. It was a means of getting together. That's all it was. And then that shapes the kind of music you like, right? And then when you grow up, you become more into computers because, that's, you're just sitting there and maybe exploring a little bit of the technology, and then becomes a new type of personality, but it's very much conditioned by this kind of, right, this social kind of substratum. Okay, thank you for that. Rafael is the next. Rafael,
Yeah, can you hear me?
yes, very well.
So I'm Rafael. I'm from Petrópolis. It's a city in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And I guess my relation with music for the last 15 years, I've been very immersed in the Brazilian hip hop culture. Uh, I started mostly filming videos, but that escalated and I worked organizing events. I think, in most areas of that. And now, years later, I'm really interested in writing like essays about the history of Latin American hip hop and its cooptation and I mean its mutations throughout the years. But I'm also I really love experimental music. I'm an improvisational musician as well, so I play like in a lot of more noise events or experimental music events here in Brazil. So I got a feed in that area as well. And I really love reading about music. I recently finished Sound and Bound, that collection of essays by I think DJ Spooky. That really
Mhm.
got me like got my brain moving in a lot of directions of how to write about music and about sound. So I was really excited about this class. I think that's it.
All right. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that book is interesting. I think it's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of dated. Like at this point, is like there's a sort of like an optimism about like hip hop in that era. Like I don't know, it is early 2010s, whereas like, oh, sampling is revolutionary. Is this new thing? Yeah, it is. But also like there's a bunch of other things. It's kind of like falls into that kind of internet optimism of that time, which it's not his fault. I do feel like that's a very interesting character. His music is interesting too, very interesting. And it's cool that you're doing a history of hip hop in South America. I do feel like that could um have good implications. I'm research hip hop myself, but from the other end, I guess, which is like how American hip hop artists have appropriated a lot of like Brazilian music. That's one of the research that I do at my PhD, like 70s Brazilian music. They're very into that, right? Um, so not as much about the Brazilian scenes in Latin America, but I do think there's a lot in that. There's a lot of the same kind of processes. I feel like jazz is something that happens all over Latin America and is given like different names, and the same happens to hip hop. Um, so like jazz in like I don't know, in Brazil it's called choro or samba, and in Argentina it's tango, and in Trinidad it's calypso, and in there's different names to the same thing, which is this kind of collect or cumbia in Colombia, I guess, and there's this kind of rumba in Cuba, right? There's a bunch of them, and it's always improvisation and syncopation, and it's kind of polyrhythms and this kind of religious harmonies, hymns and stuff that creates the same thing all over. So there's jazz all over, and the same happens to hip hop. I think same like kind of parallel process of convergence. Of course, there's a kind of like homogenization of like American culture in there as well, like this kind of imperialistic process, right? Which also happens with jazz, of course. But I do feel like there's separate processes going on there to formulate kind of like hip hop all over like the Americas, right? So interesting stuff. It's good that you're into that and noise as well. So I love a little diversity and a little like open-mindedness about stuff. Um, and what else? Yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna say. Okay, Jarina. Is it Jarina? Jarina? I'm sorry if I mispronounced.
No, it's okay. Yarina.
Yerina. Okay,
I
okay.
think you interviewed me like some time ago, but I am not 100% sure, but I think it was you. Yeah,
okay.
so I was at the new center, then I took a bit of a break, then I came back like the last few months, and I'm trying to finish up, and I feel like I'm almost there.
Okay.
And I needed one more workshop, and I was interested in this one because I am working with some distribution, freelance distribution of some documentaries about music. And I don't know if I will get to write about them or if I'm just going to do like distribution pitches, but I might. But I do love music, and I would say that my writing about it has just been really just talking about it, like very naive. Like I don't have a, I don't have any music theory or anything like that kind of background. I do like electronic, I do like indie rock, but honestly, I like some cheesy stuff as well, like some pop, and yeah, just a bit of everything. And sometimes it's based on my mood, and so I just hope to. I am not really looking to become some kind of pro, but I hope to get something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, documentaries. I mean, Rafael also mentioned that. I feel like documentaries is another type of writing that's very useful when it comes to music. It's another type of way of doing research around it. And there's other types of doing. I mean, organizing events and stuff. That's also a kind of criticism in its own way. Curating and stuff. But documentaries in specific, I feel like they give you a very similar structure that you have in music criticism, although without being in the literary form. So there's that. There's also a thing I'm interested about is like how to construct knowledge through there's other media and stuff. Create like essays that are not really in writing, right? And this kind of transmediatic comparisons. And you said naive. I think naive is usually good, but naive is also hard. It's harder than it seems. Very hard to be naive, and especially when you get, you need to be naive, but with a lot of references and a lot of like you have to have this backbone of your own kind of reservoir of things that you can connect to with that music. And the more you get that, the less naive you become, and the harder it is to be naive about stuff. So I think keeping the naivete is good, and hard, and it's not a problem at all. Okay, last one is Max, if you're here, Max Turner.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry the camera's off. I'm just on the road right now. Service in and out. But I'm glad to be joining. This is my first time doing anything with the new center, and kind of opposite story in the sense that I just learned of this course existence just a couple of days ago, and it was really perfect timing for me because I feel like I've been searching for some theoretical framework for like some of the projects I'm involved with as a musician and as a writer, and they have been like two things I really enjoy, but have struggled to connect or have been like kind of cautious to connect. I think for maybe knee-jerk reasons in line with the sort of quote that we've been using as a refrain throughout like the first session and the description about dancing about architecture. And so reading the description and the refute to that was just very exciting because it felt like there's a possibility opening up of some finding more interesting marriage than like the ones that I had imagined on my own. And so excited. In terms of my own musical background, I'm not like a trained instrumentalist. Any background that I have is probably more largely technical. For a long time, I was really just doing like sound design, working at a more granular level, because it was just what I like had the skill set to do, and I think that like aptitude in terms of just being into doing really tedious stuff. And more recently, pop music has kind of like come into like the fold of what I'm working with and thinking about, because of like quite the opposite qualities. I think like the capacity of music generally to be like a really accessible or common like protocol to people in a space, across space, time, whatever, is like of course, so powerful, and pop music is singularly, kind of like the best example maybe of that. And I think I'm just interested anytime I can sense like a potent cultural carrier, like pop music can be, and then thinking about ways to like make that distort that or manipulate that or like hijack that, make it interesting, subversive, is like something that I could imagine unlocking through criticism and like doing some messy translation, putting it in conversation with other non-obvious like mediums. Yeah, that's a bit about where I'm coming from. I didn't say anything about musical references, but
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I don't need you to turn your camera on or anything like that, or even talk if you want. Like, if this is your first class at the news center, there's different levels of engagement you can have to the class. It's up to you, really. Your audio, I think you're probably on your phone because your audio was a bit mushy, but I think I could tell everything that you said apart. Yeah, I think criticism, the thing you talked about as, pop as this kind of object that's still very interesting or very conductive to, new experiments, or that is like, I don't know, something that you can hijack, is that, or is like a protocol for encountering new forms and new people. I think that's pretty much on the spot. And it's also, I think, conductive to new forms of like communication and conversations that we need to invent. Because I feel like criticism is very like dead. Is it like a dead form in a sense? It's very millennial in a way. Like Pitchfork is kind of like is very dated. And then you have this kind of influencer culture, which it hasn't taken shape yet into something that it's chuggy. What's chuggy?
It's like a neologism, we could call it that way. I like it. You can like type it in the Urban Dictionary sort of thing, and it's like saying when you categorize something as millennial, but in a bad sense, like
Okay.
poorly, because there are like millennial stuff that you can say it's nice, but
Yeah.
there are some others that they're definitely not.
Yeah.
And music criticism, it's sort of chuggy, like
Yeah.
Fantano, for example.
It is. And Fronteno is the most like I guess the most recent types that we have. I think it's very much like it's millennial in the sense, and I don't use the generational kind of hierarchizations much because I think they're very like located. But I think music criticism is very located. It's very Brooklyn
Yeah,
in 2000s, early 2010s. It's very white Brooklyn,
it's like hipsterish.
yeah, hipster is a specific type of person. It's very dated by now, and we haven't found a new way of articulating what music is and how to, judge it, and talk to each other about it. We haven't done that very well. We've found ways of like listing music, creating like playlisting or creating like archives. People do that, having discords with archives of music, but those are very like um more like collections more than criticism. There's not a lot of judgment in there. You need to figure out a new way to do it. And pop is still and very much, I think I would say more than ever, the main kind of art form that we have that like brings people together still and that gets people talking. And the fact that we don't have a new form of criticism is really like a shame that, yeah, that's part of the point of this workshop, I guess, is trying to figure it out together. Um, so that's enough. Thank you for everyone to presented. That was cool. Getting you guys together a little bit and also getting you guys to know each other because we're going to talk about your own tastes and, defend yourselves in your writing. So let's start doing that, shall we? So do you guys want to do the review of the assignments first or the little lecture first? Okay, let's just do the assignments actually, because I feel like we can just modulate the time of the lecture afterwards, depending on how long the review of the assignments go for. Okay. So today, yeah, this is how I changed the structure a little bit. You can see this, right? Okay, so this is how I changed the structure a little bit. You won't be able to read everything, of course, but I changed sort of what we're doing in each class a little bit in relation to what's in the initial description. Today we were reading the outputs, and we're discussing the following: taste, right? The critic as an authority in what they're saying, and the sort of conditions of judgment and what judgment can do, or what does it mean for music, right? That's what we're doing today. So assignments. We have 6 assignments, which is not much, but it's fine. You know, I'd rather, I think it's, in a way, it's kind of better because you can kind of, we can kind of focus on each assignment a little bit more, a little bit better, on each of you guys. Like ideally, this would be just one person and we'd be all talking about the work of that person, like a huge coaching session. But yeah, we have everyone else is also fine. We have like means of comparison, that's fine. But I would recommend, you know, if you're doing a workshop, we're what, like 12 today, 11 or something. You know, the point of the workshop is creating work. So I get it. If you just want to be here to talk, you know, hear me talking, that's fine as well. I realize I have a beautiful voice and really good ideas. But the point of this, the main point is to see you guys like putting out work and maybe getting you guys published somewhere or something like that, you know. Okay, so let's start. Let's jump in. Just pick a random person or something like Thomas. Okay. Let's just read this one. Okay, Schoenberg and Merzbow and John Zorn. 3 very bold choices, I would say. Very hard to write about all those. And so very I guess your taste is kind of experimental, I guess. And we're good then for Schoenberg. Although it was one of Schoenberg's late works, Opus 24 reflects his intentions to look at the past and mold it with his 12-tone technique. Inspired by Francesco Petrarca, it includes one of his sonnets, which gives the opus some drama, almost like an opera. Okay. It's not the most experimental work of his career, given that it was composed in the 12-tone period. Its inspiration in folk traditions hinders his innovative vision. Okay. Nearly not his best composition, so it neither his most accurate compositional chamber piece. As it is, Schoenberg was in the birth of his experimental age. So you go from just you tone it down a little bit. You don't change your perspective much, right? You just tone it down. And for you, the more experimental it is, the better, I guess. So it just becomes like, oh, this is not experimental enough. This is really not experimental. This is very conventional, actually. Okay. I would say this is very descriptive for like a punchy punchy kind of one-liner. This would be good in a longer like if you were like historicizing the piece like you did here, like Petrarca and about the sonnet that he's using and stuff. In a longer piece, that's very important actually, because you need to set that, you know, that work into some bedrock foundation and stuff. But in a short one, you can be kind of stupid about it. You know, you don't need to be that informational. There's an element of criticism, which is that you need to embody sort of your kind of your full, in a way. You kind of embody your perspective, really embody your taste in it. You know, you don't need to be neutral about it necessarily, especially in this kind of one-liner kind of exercises. This is not bad per se. I don't think it's bad as a good. I mean, also picking Schoenberg is like a kind of crazy because, you know, that's not a thing you summarize in a sentence. I mean, you could summarize like Schoenberg's in general in a sentence, but if you're going to one a piece, it's gonna be super specific and super like complex, right? If you don't know, Schoenberg is like I guess, inventor of surrealism, 12-tone technique, and a bunch of, you know, really revolutionary kind of composer, and like kind of invented let's say, the avant-garde, or broke down classical music forever. Sounds a lot to me like horror film soundtracks in a way, because it's very like suspenseful, it's very like full of these sharp turns. Very hard to know what you expect from a Schoenberg piece. It goes all over the place. And I realized that like doing the good, mid, and bad, when I tried to do it myself, it was kind of like I have an opinion about this, right? So the other 2 is just me trying to fill the fill the gaps, and which is, it feels very inauthentic. but this is kind of like what I wanted from you a little bit. I feel this way is what you did here is the easier path, which is, oh, I'll just like create a gradation for it, right? So this is really experimental, not as much, not really not experimental, but it would be good to also impersonate a different yourself. Like maybe you don't like it that it's experimental, right? Like I can see here that you like that it's experimental. I think this is your opinion, I would say. Maybe I'm wrong about it. Okay. Um, but you don't need to be that person that likes the experimentalism, right? You can be someone that thinks Schoenberg is, pretentious or whatever, which there are a lot of people that do that. And this doesn't need to be what you will publish about it, because this is not a publishing exercise, right? But you need to free yourself from the perspective that you have is very interesting. You want to say something, Thomas? I'm talking a lot, but
No. Yeah, I was, yeah, kind of my approach with this piece was very interesting because I haven't heard it before. I wanted to hear it for this workshop. And yeah, my first impression was very like, I have been listening to Schoenberg many times and other pieces, most famous of him, but this one was kind of like, yeah, under the radar. So my first impression was this is not like the most
nice.
experimental, yeah, kind of what I like about Schoenberg, but also I was interesting about, yeah, I was very like, it was telling for me how he managed to take those traditions from yeah, sonnets or Renaissance and like mold it in a way that
Yeah.
was like, yeah.
Yeah, and you took this kind of like two sentence approach, right? So this is like you always give like a little bit of like a judgment on the piece and then some sort of background, right? Um, which I think is good, but you can always work to synthesize, you can always do it in one sentence. The less, that kind of like very old piece of advice for writers, which is like the least words you use, the better. I do think it's very useful, and especially in like mediums like journalism, where you have a certain maximum words amount that you will have to use, because you have to fit the page or whatever, and people have a low attention span. They can only read now like, I don't know, 100 words if it's in a Instagram slide. If it's not in an Instagram slide, it's gonna be like 20 words maximum. But I don't think this. Yeah, I think this is. I mean, you did your work. You did the description of it, I guess. So Merzbow, the latest album from the Japanese artist, is an epic journey through noise, glitch, and grindcore, an immersion to an altered digital realm of chaos, texture, somberness, and spectral. Spectral, you mean the sense of spectralism, or in the sense of ghosts?
Yeah, ghosty, somber, yeah.
Yeah. There's a sort of like there's a sort of a little bit of a confusion between like characteristics that are kind of subjective and things that are um, elements of music like texture, and spectralism could be considered that too. Like spectral is also a term for a musical term, but I think this is good. I mean, I think you should mention like noise artists in the beginning. There's also a comma here which doesn't fit. This is not a comma. It's some English stuff might just I'll just comment, I know most of you are not like native English speakers, and that also shapes, the language of what you're writing. This is not like, this is not a music criticism workshop. I should say this is like a English music criticism workshop, which is a very different thing, if you're coming from somewhere else, learning to write in a different language is very hard. And usually like I write in Portuguese, for example, that's my main language. If I try to translate from Portuguese to English, I get this very kind of baroque, kind of complex shit. That when I'm trying to translate back, like if I try to write in Portuguese and try to translate back to English, I start to cut a lot of words. I cut and cut and cut and cut, because Portuguese, the syntax of it, the kind of way you write about it, it requires you to be more complex with the language. Because, for example, one rule of it is that you cannot repeat the same word. If you repeat the same word in the same kind of paragraph, it becomes, that's considered like poor writing, it's poverty in writing, right? So you need to use very synonymous for words. But if you do that in English, that becomes like you're fucking like You're like the most like fruity writer ever, you know. It's kind of like you're like creating fluff out of, you know, it's purple prose. So there's stuff like that in the translation of your own native language to English. You will find this kind of barriers, right? Do you have a question, Senza, or something to say? Oh, sorry, you raised your hand. I thought you had something. Okay, mid. I was left wanting more, though it's a hard listen. Time went pretty fast. Perhaps compression means substance. This is a good, I think this is the type of sentence that I really like. Perhaps compression means substance. Because it's kind of like it is in itself very compressed. And it says a lot about the record with this kind of very abstract writing. And it's very punchy also. Um, I was left wanting more. It's like, oh, it's a bit cliche, I would say. It's like a thing that you say very easily, right? Which is fine to have some of those in the writing. Um, Time went pretty fast for a hard listen is also, I mean, yeah, but I do like the finale of it, and I like the build up to it. You wanted to say something? No, it's fine. Uh, and bad, sometimes it's difficult to grasp measurable textures and transitions with tinnitus appearing instantly. Oh, wow. But somehow this is the pleasure of hearing measurable. I like it. You have tinnitus? Or you just
Yeah,
when
I
you...
was referencing about the metaphor.
Yeah, I see, I see, I see, I
Some
see.
of the sounds sound like tinnitus,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And you know, sometimes you will see also that sometimes the three of them could fit in the same review because most reviews would not be one-sided as this one-liner, right? So you will have like checks and balances within the review for your own position, right? To create subtlety, to create kind of, you know, um, to create, you know, more layering of your opinion. You know, you won't just be, you know, claim is super shit or claim is extremely good all the time. You have to go back and forth, right? So you sometimes you'll see that, you know, this is useful. This is almost like you have a blurb here, you know, for the record. You do these checks and balances of what you're listening for, and you use textures here better than the first square. This is a better way of using it because textures here is using as a qualifier and here is like an object, right? Okay, great. Third one, John Zorn, great musician. Really like it. If you don't have never listened to John Zorn, you should check it out. He's like does everything that a musician can possibly do. And he has this downtown music gallery in New York that's very interesting too. If you ever are in New York, they always play. It's always free. They have this group of people who play for pennies. I don't know how they survive really. It's from donations basically, and they have this community and they play everywhere. Like I was in this watching my friend in a concert the other day, and one of the guys from this downtown music gallery was there playing like free jazz together with them. And it was like in this paper shop. It wasn't even like they would play anywhere for anything, you know. They just like playing music, which is, you know, it's honorable, I'd say. And you know, it is also the situation of most musicians in other places that are not the US. It's just that's that's what you get. That's what you got. There's no, but in the US, you know, you could make money. In New York, you can make money as a musician, actually. You can live as a musician. Yes, like if you want to play, like, you know, you can live as a musician actually kind of well. Um, but they don't know how they manage. But John Zorn is very interesting. Has this piece called Cobra that's very interesting, which is like a free improvisation, but it has this very tight rules. It becomes very demanding and commanding. They are almost like militaristic at some point. There's some rules to the game that make it like it's kind of like an imposition who can impose themselves better onto the other musicians, basically. Very interesting piece. But so let's hear what you had to say about it. The experimental avant-garde heavy rock masterpiece from the bona fide musician frees, this is another comment that here, frees himself to perform an esoteric record. It inspired the late playwright Richard Foreman to stage an opera in 2009. I don't know if this is relevant, the second thing here. Like to the summary, I mean. Like if this was a bigger review, you could separate into paragraphs even. But I like the sort of stringing of adjectives. That's usually a good way of doing like a lump characterization of something. Experimental avant-garde heavy rock masterpiece, right? Especially if you do like terms that don't go very well together, it creates this very specific kind of image, right? Experimental avant-garde is the same thing, but if you put avant-garde heavy rock, is another just different thing completely. And if you string things like that, it must have some sort of rhythm also. There's a prosody to the writing that must work. In this case, it does, I think. Experimental avant-garde heavy rock. Yeah, it's kind of like there's a rhythm to the writing, right? So that's another tip, I guess. Like if you're when you're writing it, read out loud, see if there's a rhythm to it. That's also important for the flow of the reading, right? Mid, a roller coaster of emotions and moods gives the record an almost comedic act paired with the opera of format. Okay, I think that's a better way to introduce the opera here than in the other that it was very separated. But that's the allure of the piece, the irony and satire behind it. Yeah, this is similar to what you did here with Merzbow, right? Like the bad thing is the good thing is the what you did, which is like a turn that you can do, but also be careful when you're writing. I mean, if you just do one piece about some piece of music, sure, but if you do a lot of different pieces, like be careful for the kind of like tricks that you are repeating, right? Because sometimes it's just like, yeah, you know. But this is a good one. I would say like emotions and moods is a bit how do you say that? You repeat the term is like
Repetitive.
non-repetitive, I would say is
Redundant.
redundant, yeah. But it does, I mean, emotion and moods have two different connotations that, maybe you could take this out of this sentence and put it somewhere else, right? Like that's another technique too. Sometimes instead of being sometimes you want to give so much emphasis on that, right? Emotion and mood, but you don't need to put it in the same sentence. Like take emotions out, put it in the next sentence, right? Use it. You don't need to spend all the words that you have for that in that moment, right? Like keep it to yourself, right? If you're writing it, just separate the term and stuff, and maybe when you need another term afterwards, you will need more terms afterwards, right? You just put it in there. Um, it's apocryphal occult esotericism, clearly not for everyone. It's a niche treasure supported by the unapologetics. I like it. I like this one. Very hard on it, and becomes this kind of there's this religious imagery to it, right? Like the occult esotericism and the apologetics. Um, but you also still call it a treasure, which is still like not bad, right? None of those are, I would say, bad. None of those are scathing critiques of them, which is fine. There's some you will develop a voice for yourself, and some people will be more aggressive with the writing than others. Okay, that's good. I like it. Very good selections. Let's go to another one. I don't know if we will be able to do all of them. I hope we do, but I'm talking too much. Okay, this one. Was this Senza?
Yes, be harsh on me, please.
Yeah, Beach Boys. There is a classic. I don't know that record. Read for 20.
Every Latin American person should listen to that fucking record. It's the best record from 2025
Okay.
from Venezuela.
Okay, I'll definitely hear that then. Okay. I guess I'm in debt. And Pretend Tapestry Live. Okay. All right. So good for Beach Boys. Every time you go back to this, there's always something new to delve into without necessarily referring to the musical side of things. Yeah, this is something that's very a lot of times is brought about this record, right? There's this continuous recuperation, like you can always listen to it and find more stuff. Both this and Smile, I think this applies to very well. 1966 must have been a great year for both music production and drugs in a place like the US. Yes. So, yeah, good sentence, I'd say. So drugs, I would say that, you can trace kind of like a history of music, pop music, based on like the drugs they were using in each period, in each place, and maybe even human civilization, really. Um, so there's a sound of the drugs here, definitely in this kind of 60s music, and then like it's cocaine, the 70s with punk and this energy and stuff, and then and heroin, of course, that takes over. Just so gives a different mood to the music. And then it's like ecstasy and stuff, right? Synthetics. And we got to think, what's the music for ketamine and purple drink and stuff? Are we listening to today, right? And how that shapes our consciousness and everything. I think there's very little research on like how music and drugs are very much related aesthetically. This is just a side note. So if you want to research that, if you want to go check out the and research that, I invite you to. I don't know if a lot of people will give you money for that because they are very like they're compromised morally, you know.
Mhm.
But it is a thing. Like there's no salsa without a lot of cocaine, right?
Of course, there's no salsa without heroin.
Yeah, exactly. Because players need to play like maybe 5, 6 concerts, like
Yes,
yeah.
totally.
So it is a condition, like a material condition that is there. And of course, like this also shapes the way you experience music very much, right? So music is this thing that very shaped by drugs. So I like the sentence. It's also kind of ironic, right? I think it's 67 though, right? The record. Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
I might have missed, but the
Okay.
60s.
Okay, but it sounds a historical testimony, a time capsule, most def, not just a record. Okay. Yes. So I don't know if yeah, this is very this is the opposite of Thomas that was more formal. This is true I don't know, playful, but that's fine depending on the context. In this context that we're in here, that's fine because I'm like that too. Maybe if I was a more of a serious person, I would consider it a problem, but not necessarily. Um, it's a historical testimony, a time capsule. Well, in a way, kind of every record is, I would argue. Um, Most definitely not just a record. It is not just a record. It is a very special record. It's hard to, it's also like in the same way that Thomas picked a hard one because it was like a very complex one. This one is a hard one because it's too much. There's too much discourse about it um, in a way that's very hard to do, this kind of aggrandizing that this category requires, right? That's why, but I think this is a good one. This is like a punchy little thing. I would maybe reduce it a little bit. There's a good sentence here in the middle. I would maybe cut this sentence here because this is implicit in this what you said already, right? Yeah, like
Mhm.
it's not just the music, right? Um, and then you kind of expand on it in the sentence even more, so you don't need that part, right? For better or worse, Bad Sounds has become a milestone not only for Western music and the free world, but for music criticism worldwide through the 2000s. This is very true. Yes, music criticism. This record is a huge one for music criticism. Sometimes in spite of the actually existing contribution the record might have. Okay. It's weird when great things only serve as such when taken as a token form rather than its own content substance. I would pick a word here. Like it's not, this becomes a little bit too academic. Like when you're trying to create, trying to make kind of theorized around it, right? Um, I think this is a interesting point, but that maybe you would have to expand more on the review for that to work out well. Um, like that this is more of a token of something than really a record, right? Like when you listen to it, you don't, not even listening to music anymore, you're just listening to discourse. Which is a great point. Like this record and the Beatles made
Yep.
what it is like this record and Sgt. Pepper's, right? Made what pop music is both in terms of production and layering of tracks and of discourse and how we understand and talk about pop music right to this day. And very much so, I think that's very much exaggerated, right? Like I don't think, and as much as I love the Beach Boys, I really do love, and I love Brian Wilson, as you'll see like at the end of this class, but they are not that important.
Yes, it's
A lot
alright.
a lot of stuff that's going on. There's a lot others. We can talk about other music. We don't need to talk about like no, we don't need another text about the Beatles, right?
Mhm.
There's so much about the Beatles. Like you could probably like print if you have the amount of things that were printed about the Beatles and you put it in a single line, it's probably go around the earth many, many times, involve it and then eat it up, I would say. So, there are other bands in the universe. Too hype, too corny, too depressing. Is it depressing though? The lyrics maybe, yeah. Biggest prick will hear this and tell you it sounds blissful and timeless. Okay.
Me. That's me.
Yeah. It's good. It's good being self-depreciated like that because you are really embodying something else here, man. It would be better if you said this is blissful and timeless here in this part. Yeah, you couldn't even tell if they actually like going to the beach from hearing this stuff. Yeah, posers. Okay. Yeah, this is a good one. It's kind of funny, like a joke. I think it's nice. Yeah, it's a little bit one-sided for doesn't give is I think this is the kind of like the opposite of Thomas in a sense. It's like very much the opinion without having sort of the information about it. But it's interesting that you use this opposite to describe the record. So you were describing the record as blissful and timeless, but you're saying that the person who will say that is the biggest prick you know. So you're kind of, it's interesting. You're using that to describe the record, actually, right? This is the description of the record you're making through someone else's voice. Okay, nice. We choose 420. Music is so 2025. It is, that's true. 2025 is very important since it's present day, present time. It is, right? You mean here. Or since it's, I guess, I don't know, this is ambiguous a little bit, so the writing of it. Since it is and since it's would be the different
Maybe I
sentence.
chop like the grammatics of it.
We only have here and now, unfortunately, right? Yeah. The only argument backing up this claim is the sole existence of this record changed my mind. Okay, I like it. I like it very much. I don't like, I don't know if about the change my mind. I think this final little sentences like that, they tend not to help the point. Like if you finish on here, it would be better. If you finish on here, it would be better, I'd say. Like it kind of it creates too much of this attitude, that you don't need. It's the attitude is already implied in the rest of the review, right? Okay, a solid record front to back, despite the challenges it posits from the standpoint of production, sonority, and general appeal. If pop music is defined by the reach it has at my mass level, does this record get the job done? Maybe, but affirming it does might be a little bit too bold. This is a comment to be cut, but maybe. But affirming it, I would also stop the sentence here and start another one here, with maybe another word here or something like that. But I like it. It's very neutral in a way that I just now I know that your opinion is this one because you mentioned it before we started, but I wouldn't know if I read this. Maybe that was your opinion, really. Yeah. Pop music is defined by reach. So this record hasn't reached the masses, you mean?
I kind of trying to say that despite the fact that it's a record which is popping in a way
Oh, it
in
is.
certain communities,
Okay.
and practically is like a vaporwave pop record or something
Mm,
like it. It
okay.
tries to be pop, yet
Okay.
I don't think it gets the job done because it's really I wouldn't say difficult, but it's very far off. It's very
Yeah.
left field, very Gen Z.
I mean, we can discuss the meaning of pop also, like maybe later on. But pop doesn't mean anything much anymore. It's like it just means it's recorded music, right? The ontology of the object is not the notation; it's just the record. You know, so it doesn't need to be appealing. Doesn't need to be sonically anything at all, really. It just needs to be sold in the market as a record. Something that is a form of recorded sound, right? That's the ontology of it. It's music that's written in the studio, written in the process of recording it, right? Um, but yeah, I think it's okay. It's like it's solid. It's just a bunch of noise. Are just people really into this type of stuff? Are young people really into this type of stuff? I don't know about this one. It seemed like I don't know. It just made it all. I need to say something about this, right? It's the same for this one, I guess. It's just like, oh, it's just noise. There's a critique that you can make of anything, and it's the critique of like lazy people who do not want to open themselves up to other types of music. They always do that. Oh, it's just noise, right? It's just a bunch of noise. Like this is
Mhm.
not it's not really thought through. And I realized this you're just here at this point. You're like, oh, I wrote what I like. I tried to be like polite about it, and now I just need to fill in this other square here, which have nothing to do with this, right? And
I
that,
mean,
that
but I do feel that way, I must say. It's just a bunch of noise, which is good. It's like listening to Mersbo.
Okay, I see, I see, I see, I see. So, so you see, that sentence would be interesting if it was a positive review, like you just did right now. Like
Okay.
just a bunch of noise, which is great, right? Like it's just a bunch
Mhm.
of noise as like you were kind of puppeting this kind of criticism as a positive attribute. That would be interesting. But as a bad review, I don't think so. Okay.
Okay.
Jam, is it blissful? Is it real? Yes. Yet it feels like a dream, and dreams are mere illusions from the mind's eye. Yet I want to dream, and only that, all because of this. I guess this is a quote from the record. Shit's so good it made me write it. Oh no, shit's so good it made me write a small poem back when I first heard it. Guitar music in the 21st century is only relevant for records like these. Nice. I like it. There's this kind of thing of the daft nod thing too. If this shit's so good, there's this kind of like this meme talking here. I guess the change my mind and the posers too is a little bit of that, right? This kind of like it is like tweeting in a way, in the sense of also in the language that you're using. But I like it. I think, yeah, the stuff is so good. You write a small you write a poem when you first hear it as a kid, or I don't know when you first heard it.
Yeah, I wasn't a kid. That's the sad part.
Yeah, sorry. So you wrote this where like
This record came out, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in 2018, 2019, like
yeah,
BC, before COVID.
okay.
And I
Yeah.
indeed wrote that stuff when I first heard it.
Okay, that's nice. That's nice. And it's nice that you put it here too. I don't think you would need to put it here also for this to work, right? You don't need to write the poem down to say, hey, I wrote a poem about this the first time I heard it. That's how good it was, right? But it's good. Like I thought this was part of the music that you were analyzing or something, the lyrics, and then this being the poem that you wrote. I think it's interesting. Um, Okay. Pretend is one of those bands which stands out because of its own esoteric and mysterious background. Their music supports this purpose, but left field milestones are usually left on the side of the road of music history. Bummer. Yeah, interesting. Left field milestone. So you think it is a left field milestone, but you think the character impersonated here don't is not into it. Left field milestones, I guess, right?
Yes.
It has this that structure too, ends with this kind of like finale, kind of like finishing little words or something like that, little clarifying sentence. I think those have the same kind of vibe. They're solid. I like these ones. These ones would need more, I think, a little bit more effort, but that's fine. I realize it's also like it's work to do this stuff, right? And I'm asking you guys to do work, which is sometimes complicated. It's fine if you don't want to put a lot of work into it, right? Um, Let's try to do this one. MA. All right. Doctor. Oh, I was at a Lucrecia Dowd concert like 2 days ago. So there we go. It was like a party at this Brooklyn warehouse. She was DJing also. Um, she did like a listening party of her new record. She has a new record coming out soon. I do like her 2022 record very much. Very good record. One of the best of that year, I would say. Let's start from this one then. Where is she from? Is she actually here? I like it. A seductive voice. Each sound subtly tells its own story. Each detail, each word, a world on its own. Beautiful structure, concrete, spooky, refined. Top-notch sound design. I like this very short sentence structure. It's very short, right? Pa 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 pa. I like it. I mean, if this was a longer text, I would say varying like small sentences and big sentences is an art form that you need to kind of pay attention to, because it is the briefing of the reader that you're kind of playing with, right? For a very short one like this, I really like it. The list of stuff, if you're doing a longer one, a longer review, you would maybe need to connect these things better. But it being like this little bullet thing with little bullets inside, I kind of like it. Um, this thing about her being from beyond, or having this voice, the position of the voice not being clear, both in the audio, like the soundscape, and within the aesthetic of her sound, right? I really like that. So there's the ambiguity in that, I guess, right? It's both like you don't know where she is in terms of the span of the audio, right? And in terms of the aesthetics of the music. I think this is good because of that. This is kind of like literary in a way. This is nice. It also can be a little bit, can be a little bit cliche, but I think it's nice. I like it overall. Okay. The voice is a bit tender, but in general, the song captivates. The voice is a bit tender, but in general, no, the voice is a bit tender, but in general, the song, that's it, right? The voice is a bit tender, but in general, the song captivates you in an intricate loop in which a poem is actually revealed through the sounds. Interesting. I like it also. Okay. Also, like, if anyone wants to jump in and have opinions about this stuff, this is not me just reviewing your writing. I want you guys to participate as well. So if you have any sort of take, you can just raise your hand or have something to say. I know it's also like a bit intimidating talking about other people's writings. Um, Like someone gets in, this is shit. You wrote really badly here, or something like that. No, you shouldn't do that. But if you have opinions, if you have points, if you know the record and you have a different, take on it, if you think this is, not a good description of it, to, can jump in for sure. Could someone teach her how to use more instruments or something? This is just a modulated sound with some SFX in a song. That's a song now, I guess. Okay. I think it is a good critique of her music, that thing. She does, it's just her voice and some effect that are very well modulated, right? It is kind of like a few recordings being looped around and played with, but she has also like the vocals are very well trained. She has a kind of like bolero structures at some points. For these records, this record I don't know so if that's the point so much, but um, there is a. I mean, she's a very well trained singer, I'd say. So I don't know if that critique would land very well, but I get it. I think it's nice also. I think it's a good drum. Okay, new clips. Yeah, you were doing the songs, right? You're doing songs, not the record, I guess. Yeah, which is fine. I think that makes it easier to write a short, like tweet like one-liner if you're doing um just a song, right? Because the song is, more compact to describe it. So the little clips with Tyler, you would not find these kinds of raw bars in hip hop nowadays. I don't know about that. This is truly rap in 2025. The kind of record that makes the rest feel weak. Strong lyrics, otherworldly instrumentals, a dream trio. Okay, this sounds like a release in a way. But I don't know if I like the start of it. It's like I don't know. You can say that about anything. It's very generic in a way. And I don't think this is true, right? I think there's hip hop for everyone, and at every point in time, it's just like about how well you're good at, like how good you are in finding it, right? Um, Kind of record that makes the rest of your week is a good one, I think. Strong lyrics, other Willie instrumentals, a dream trio. You're using this kind of structure of the lists, like you did here. I would say the dream trio is a good thing to mention because it contextualizes what the group is, the two of them plus Tyler. Um, but this could be a sentence, right? The dream trio, blah blah blah. Like try to construct the subject object, like subject verb object sentence and stuff. Sometimes it is more helpful. Um, the production sounds powerful but a bit monotonous. Delivery is excellent, and Tyler's feature is a good choice. Nice blend with the rest of the album. Yeah, this is like a piece of criticism you could find somewhere, which is neither here nor there very much. And it's all about, when you say it's a good choice, it doesn't say much. It says just I like it, right? This is something that critics will do very often, but I personally am like, I don't know, it doesn't tell me a lot about much about the record, and I don't know. I'd rather, kind of a show don't tell kind of thing, I'd rather you show me why I think it's good or something. Um, Maybe do that a little bit, but saying it's monotonous is like, oh, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, kind of like it is also kind of like a easy kind of thing to do. Not sure why these guys are rapping like Honey in 2008 and still hating those who evidently formed them. It sounds like the uncle who wants to sound cool to their cousins. They're not that old, right?
They
These
are.
nephews. How old are they?
they're
Like,
they're kind of unks. They're like 40, I think.
I
mm,
think Pusha T is 40 something and Mel is like 52 or
oh
something
Yeah,
like
shit,
that.
they're unks.
really? I thought
Yeah.
they were like 30 to 40 or something. Holy shit! But that would be impossible, right? Like their first couple stuff was like a long time ago, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Crazy.
they got huge like in their late 20s, and it's
Yeah,
been like 20 years since then.
yeah, it's crazy. Okay. Yeah. That is a critique they can do of it. Like going for this kind of personal thing, or like they're just trying to sound cool to their cousins. But at the same time, like they are the OGs, I guess, of this, right? They did that already. Like they are cool to their nephews, I guess. they're very much that, and they're just, showcasing that, I guess, in a way. But it is an interesting angle to critique them from. Like, oh, they're out of fashion, they're all time, they're trying to keep up, right? It's like old boxer come back or something. That's a critique you can. Is it like that? That's a type of critique, that's a genre of critique. Old boxer coming back, Mike Tyson's fighting Jay Paul or something. Or what is his name? Jay or whatever. Whatever. Um, or like Rocky Balboa or whatever. Yeah, there is a genre of people coming back, but sometimes they're really good. Like Tyler, the Tribe Called Quest like reunion record is great. Like this Clips record is really great. Like they're not trying to prove anything anymore, but I guess that you're impersonating this kind of person that wants to see it from this angle, and I think it's a good job in doing that. Rapping like Kanye in 2008, but this seems like someone who's not aware of them having a career before Kanye in 2008.
To be fair, this opinion that Emme has put upon, it's one that I recently listened. It's an ongoing commentary that I've listened on this record from Clips. I listened to this guy called FD Signifier.
Mhm.
He has a YouTube channel, and he literally said this thing. What you just said is like Mike Tyson fighting against Jake Paul sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
But
because
it's like the problem. The video is called "Hip Hop Has an Age Problem," kinda.
oh shit. Mm. Oh, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's the case, but interesting that that exists. Yeah, because I would say I've heard Andre 2000 saying that too, that he did that record because he was tired of like playing the rapper, which is a position that you need to be young to do, right? It needs to be, you need to kind of put yourself out there in a certain way that's kind of very young oriented. Um, but it's just because hip hop is a young art form, people haven't turned become people are just becoming old, so they're just figuring out what an old rapper is supposed to be right now, right? Um, just as Rockstar did before, and jazz stars and before, and some maybe it will become a problem because usually young people are the ones that carry a genre forward, and that's when people get old, they don't have the kind of imaginative plasticity, let's say, like mental plasticity, really an openness to new things. That's why all if you look at the history of pop music, people who are putting out great records are all like between 20 and I don't know 28 years old or something like that, like overwhelmingly so, because you need to be attuned to your time in a way that all young people are, and because you need to be open to shit and live in this kind of like specific time of your life. um and yeah, it's also like it's also pop is directed towards young people, right? So it's also you need to appeal to them in a way that they need to look at you and see themselves too, so that requires you to be kind of young. But I don't think that is a critique that you can make of any old star, basically, right? And in this case, right, this is kind of a misconception in a way, right? Like Kanye was rapping in 2008 like Clips did before him, right? Or not the other way around, I guess. But okay, I get it. And I kind of like the bullet point here. Also, drugs, it's hard on us older folks. Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Although, I mean, yeah, well, that's a good point also. But you don't need to be doing drugs to do music. I just what I mentioned about the drugs is just that it shapes sort of the civilizational path of that the song, not like personally really, because yeah, I don't think drugs even help you very much in writing, like personally, like individually. I don't think they're helpful, but socially, collectively, I think so. For they shape the music. Yes, totally. Yeah, I know that you were joking, man, for absolutely. Um, And yeah, Luindu told me we're like at the halfway mark, so I don't know if we'll be able to do all the things before we go to a little break, but I'll try to do like this one and another, like one more maybe. Um, Dr. Dre, you just need to listen to the first seconds and you know the place is about to blow. Yeah, nice one. The rap and the melody, the power of this song is incommensurable. A bit hyperbolic here, I'd say. Like I would avoid this kind of terminologies like, oh, this is infinite, this is incommensurable, right? This is like because oftentimes it diminishes what you're trying to do, diminishes the power of the writing when you say that. If you said a thing more specific that was like a lower in the gradation of like measurability, it would maybe sound more incommensurable, right? Like sometimes if you restrain your writing, it becomes stronger. So places about to blow, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. It's becoming a bit of a cliche party song with the TikTok resurrections of these kinds of classics. These kinds of classics used to have. I don't know, there's a kind of like a sentence formation problem here, I'd say. It's becoming a bit of a cliche party song. With the TikTok resurrections, these kinds of classics used to have. They used to have, but it's becoming at the same time. I guess there's a temporal also problem here. It's a good song, and for the time, it was a killer production, but nowadays it's losing innocence. Huh. So you think the song lost its innocence in the sense, like the sense of it became worse because you can tell the problems with it, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of, I think this is kind of like a more like a writing formulation problem, maybe. It's becoming a bit of a cliche part, like, and you can also like finish this sentences better, I would say. Like, that's another thing when you're these kinds of classics have nowadays, is what you meant, maybe. Let's see. These kinds of classics have nowadays. Yeah, maybe that would make more sense, right? Like this is kind of like the past. This is like the present to future. Totally. Yeah. Okay. It's a good song for the time and comma for the time, comma. It was a killer production, but nowadays is losing innocence. It lost its innocence, I guess you meant. Or you were losing its innocence when you listened to it. Yeah, I guess. Also. Okay. I think this is a little bit confusing in terms of construction, but I get the feeling of it. Like you're talking about the sort of reception of it affecting it, I guess, right? It's crazy that people are playing this stuff today. Gangster males are so overrated. And this kind of content is both lyrically and instrumentally transcended nowadays. Very far from being Dre's best work. Yeah, this is another very I like this one. This is like a kind of like a moral identity critique that you're making here. It is a critique that people made a lot about hip hop in general, right? Also because Dre and sort of like G-Funk and kind of gangster rap was the time that rap became mainstream. So that's what everyone thought like hip hop was for decades, right? Like to this day, people think of hip hop and they think of the aesthetics and the sound of gangster rap. Which is this very specific kind of thing that emerged in a certain specific time. Just because, it was the time that rap went into MTV or whatever, and now people listen to it and it became like a satanic panic in a way, like a mini satanic panic. So there is a critique to be made of misogynistic rap and whatever, and homophobic rap as well and stuff like that. But I think you say like we're transcended that, but I think we've transcended that critique actually in a way. Like no one, I mean, the critique of this stuff is very 10 years ago in a way. You can still do it, of course, and you can still do it seriously, of course, but also like chewy is chewy, I guess. Yeah. I mean, you can still, of course, do it, but I think it is kind of people are gonna go, yeah, sure, right? And then people also realize that reality is more complex than this kind of typification, right? And people are singing about their realities, I guess, right? Which is the point about hip hop and gangsta culture. Very far from being Dre's best work is another interesting way of saying like this means like you kind of like Dr. Dre, but this work's not the best. So that's a comparison between Dre and himself, right? So that's an interesting thing to do as well in reviews and criticism, to kind of compare it with itself, because then you have a basis that's not dependent on your own kind of mediation. Is you're mediating, of course, but you're mediating the artist to himself or themselves, right? So it's like you're kind of just comparing if it's better or worse than the previous work, something very practical to do and very kind of quick and useful. Okay. I don't know if we have a lot of time to do the other ones, and I'm sorry about that. And I'll maybe like send my comments to you guys from the other ones. This one is very short. What the fuck? Yerina
I am so sorry. I was feeling intimidated to write about it. So I just literally thought I'll just say if there's anything I like or not like.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Ah, I see. Okay, that's fine. Habibi the Benz, LCD sound system. I'm losing my edge. I like that song. Or also all of it. It just had the parts that you like. I see. Okay. Um, and Raphael did a little bit. Okay, just Brazilian rappers, I guess. Interesting. Yeah. I'll check it out and send a little critique of you for you specifically. And Clara, Kate Bush, FK Twigs, and Marina Herlop. Herlop is lovely. I really like her. Um, I like FK Twigs also. You know, I like Kate Bush a lot actually. So there you go. Um, maybe let's read one or two from this here. Let's say Herlop. With Pripyat, Marina Herlov made a name for herself and became an important voice in experimental music scenes. She creates a language of her own that only she can penetrate, filled with sound, rock, cacophonies, noise. This is kind of like a little bit redundant and uncensored cowbirds, brushing against pop only to prove her precision. I think this sentence would work way better if this were specific things instead of like the noise and sound and stuff, because this is a very specific thing that, you know, it works as a comparison to musical things, right? But if these are specifics, it becomes a list that ends in an interesting way. Resting in spot only to prove her precision. I see. I like it. A little bit, like a little bit long, I'd say, in the long end. You're using a lot of the chat GPT thing. It's okay. I mean, if you guys want to use chat GPT, I'm completely fine with it.
I use it for the grammar corrections because
Yeah.
like I'm okay, I have no problem with writing in English, but then I always check it with ChatGPT to like remove the grammar errors, you know?
Yeah, that's totally fine. And also,
Yeah.
like, you can also start with it and then edit it if you want. Um, I think in the fourth class we'll talk about AI and how to kind of use it for criticism if you'd like to do that. You know, I'm not against it at all. And this is the new center, you know the deal, more or less. And but just make sure that there are some sentence constructions, like for example, this here, this kind of like use of this um like not only this but that, right? There is a lot that's very common in ChatGPT specifically. Not only she the like Kate Bush blah blah blah, but she only did that. Or like this is maybe one. No, the question remains: is it just a summary of one song alone continual emptiness? Oh, that's actually a good sentence. Yes, I like it actually. A long continuum of emptiness is a great little image. um, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, just if you use ChatGPT, just be careful with the sort of there's some very cliched and by now kind of beaten up syntactic constructions that he uses. And some of them, I used to like them, some of them, the kind of stylistic things that ChatGPT normalized, I used to use a lot, but now I'm very self-conscious about them because they became associated with, it means if I read something like I identified the ChatGPT-ness of it, I'll go like, well, this person didn't really, there wasn't enough enthusiasm for the text, the writing, right? Which is something that I value a lot in the text. Enthusiasm, not necessarily like positive enthusiasm, but like enthusiasm in the sense of your engagement to it. It makes me read the text way more attentively when I sense some enthusiasm is there, either pro or con, or in the sort of construction itself, the meticulous kind of construction of the sentence. Um, and and this engagement, I think, is very important. And this is all like um, parts of your life. Like if you're learning something that you're interested in, you will learn way faster, for example, because your engagement with it, your enthusiasm with it facilitates your kind of knowledge, your cognition of it, right? So I feel like if you write with ChatGPT or AI, keep the enthusiasm for your writing. Like don't write as if it was an email to your boss or something like that. Although, this exercise is kind of like an email to your boss in a way. I realize that, teaching environments can feel like that sometimes. And I respect that too. You have your own time and stuff. And I don't mean you, Clara, I mean everyone in the class. But try to change it in a way as to keep your enthusiasm of it, or write even with ChatGPT, use it kind of enthusiastically, you know, is what I mean. Like don't lose your kind of interest for what you're writing, you know, your kind of refinement for that interest. Okay, so I'll give a little more feedback for you. Oh, sorry, you have something to say?
No, but it's interesting because I wrote it. I didn't write it with ChatGPT. I wrote it by myself, and then I just ran it through.
No, I know. I'm not saying you did or anything like that. I'm just taking advantage of the window that has opened about that in the conversation that I thought that I meant mentioned this sign here, which is very much used by ChatGPT to just talk about it. I'm not saying you did use it or anything like that, or you know, there's not a depiction of your writing or anything like that. And if you did use it, I have no problem with it at all. And I use it all the time. That's why I know that there's some synthetic commonalities with it, and there's some specific things that he does, right? The only way is like even if with reviewing that I use it for a lot, you need to be careful because it also shapes the writing sometimes, you know, the sentence structure. Sometimes it changes commas here and there and creates like weirdly displaced kind of subject-object relations and stuff like that. And sometimes it doesn't recognize what you're trying to say and kind of shape shifts with your language, I guess. So be careful of that. But that's not to say that you did write it with ChatGPT or anything like that, right? As far as I know, every one of you wrote it with ChatGPT. I just used it as an example to talk about it. But I'll give you more thorough feedback by email. I'll do that to Rafael as well and Jirina also. And you guys can also, I would say, if you want to like go into the documents, I'll open this all to like commentary. If you want to go into the document and comment on each other's, I realize this is also more work, but if you want to do that, you're free to do that. I mean, we've read the stuff together, some of them. So if you had ideas about it when you were reading it and you want to talk, like send it to that person, just do it here, or maybe send it to that person in private. And you know, because that's good because other people will do it for you too. That would be good for you too. And we can like shape a little community around it. Okay. So now let's just go into a little 10-minute break, 12-minute break. Can we do that? Can we, it's 38 now. We come back at 50. Is that good? All right. See you soon. Hello? Anyone? Everyone's here? Thomas?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Max. Irina is here too. Okay. We'll just wait for like 30 more seconds for more people to come back, and then we'll do a little lecture for you guys. I do want to incentivize you guys for the next class to talk more. I'll maybe ask you guys your input before I give my opinions, because otherwise it's just me talking about text, which is okay, but you know, I really like people to work together in this, and maybe like doing like projects together is also maybe writing together or something like that, like writing alongside your peers. That's something I'm interested in fostering. Okay, I just start because I don't need people to be here interacting to do the lecture. So today I wanted to talk about like taste and the critic, and I'll start with this review that the band Tennis, like an indie pop band, they posted this review of Pitchfork in their Instagram profile, as a sort of critique of their record. So Pitchfork, I guess, gave them like a very mid kind of rating. It wasn't even like a bad rating, I'd say. I think it was 6 something or something like that. And they got very agitated about that. That was back in May. Okay, so I'll just read the text first and then we can comment on it a little bit. For the last 7 albums, I've watched 7 male Pitchfork writers bend over backwards to offer the worst, most uncharitable interpretations of our music. They cherry pick lyrics without context, interpolate meaning that isn't there, or are overly reductive, making me out to be as banal as a greeting card writer. I'll never forget when staff writer Ivan Rytlewski, I don't know how to pronounce that, wrote that, quote, that I, quote, scoff at tourists in his review of the song Swimmer, which is about my father-in-law's funeral. In the song's opening, I described tourists flocking to the sea as a way of highlighting the emotional dissonance I felt watching vacationers swim while my husband and I scattered his father's remains into the same sea. That scene is seared into my brain as one of the most painful and profound moments of my life. When I pushed back on his extremely mean take, his response was, quote, I know it's not a flattering reading of the line, but it's how the lyric has struck me on every listen, even knowing the backstory behind the song. Trust me, even if I'm scoffing, you will know. In his review of Face Down in the Garden, Shad de Souza barely engages with the material at all. Instead, he uses the assignment as an excuse to write a boring meditation on vibe music, listing off other bands that are vibey without offering a single ounce of insight into the album he's reviewing. His only complaint with At the Wedding, one of the few songs he bothers to mention by name, is that the story is too anodyne to bother relating to a friend. Ouch. Therein lies the difference in our tastes. My favorite writer, W.B. Sebald, told his students that no subject is too boring to write about. Aside from the fact that De Souza offers a Cliff Notes level reading of the song, I don't understand how the everydayness of a song's subject matter disqualifies it from being good. Just say you're bored, De Souza. This is about you, not me. All of his complaints feel like nitpicking, and if we're doing that, he uses the word soporific twice. Also, do these writers know they're critiquing songs? I'm not writing a dissertation. I have to sing this shit and it has to slap. There are more concerns at play than language qua language. Try singing your review to me, De Souza. See if you can still make soporific work. Not everyone can or should be Johnny Mitchell or Leonard Cohen. Some people like me, actually prefer this lightly dull, unadorned specificity, that's a quote, of a song that lets the melody shine. Our pitchfork ratings across our entire catalog haven't varied within 1 or 2/10 of a decimal, which is absurd because our growth as writers and producers is so obvious, even to the most casual music listener. What are we being rated against if not ourselves? It's simply not the case that we've stagnated for the past 15 years. Listen to Swimmer and tell me it's not an improvement upon Ritual and Repeat, which is bizarrely our highest rated album, though we considered it to be our most uneven. Even their praise misses the point. 12 Blow Tires, the only song De Souza likes, is not about a head over heels crush, as he claims, but since these dudes are all determined to make me out to be stupid or shallow or imperious, a crush must be the loftiest topic I can aspire to write about. The fact that his review is a 2-minute read tells me that Pitchfork isn't above the attention economy, even as the entire write-up is spent dismissing our music for its marketability. Artists typically work in an echo chamber, and it's difficult to anticipate how your work will translate to the outside world. This is where music criticism could be so valuable, to bridge that divide, to show us where we went wrong or how we could improve. In all our reviews, there hasn't been a single actionable takeaway, and my complaint isn't just with Pitchfork. Our latest paced review said that Face Down in the Garden wasn't as good as one of our previous records, which received a lower rating from Paste. What can I learn from that? I give music criticism a 6.8. Okay, I read everything, all the text, because I thought it was relevant to the class, and because I think it brings a lot of interesting points about music criticism and about pop artists and how they relate to it. Someone said something. I like his try singing your review. Yeah. So there's a lot of good points in this here. One of the various valid points is that criticism is cherry picking. It's impossible to like fully deconstruct any work whatsoever in a sort of very small, like, I don't know how many words this Pitchfork review has, but it's probably like less than 400 words. So it's like 2 pages maybe. You'll never get the complexity of the work. So it's not, it's the job of the critic to kind of cherry pick. You will have to cherry pick. You have to pick whatever you want to talk about. And it will be a reduction of the material that you're working with, right? And that's one of the reasons that artists are very frustrated with criticism most of the time. You know, they work for a very long time, you know, years maybe. They put out this very complex piece of work, you know, an hour a record. You know, it has, you know, a lot of money into it. He has a lot of like expectation, and then it's just like a guy can come and write, you know, 2 pages of text, which cherry picks some elements of it to make up, you know, a critique, which, you know, maybe in another day it would be a different critique. Maybe if he was feeling better, you know, that day, you know, he woke up, he was, you know, feeling happier or something, you know, it's more or less arbitrary, and you cherry pick to make up your point, which is already made up in your mind. So you're not constructing the judgment from the pieces of art that you have in front of you. You're picking up the pieces of art to justify your judgment, right? So that is a valid point. There is cherry picking. Another very valid point is the focus on the lyrics. So pop critics are very much afraid of musical parameters, to the point that they will talk about the lyrics way more than the music itself. So they will work with the record many times as if it was a statement, like she says here, like a dissertation or whatever, right? So they will work with it as if that's a poem, you know, that's a text, because they're coming from a textual tradition, right? They're coming maybe from journalism, they did some journalism, maybe literature, you know, they're working with it as if the most relevant aspect, the most salient aspect of the music was its lyrics, which, you know, it's really not. It's really, sometimes it's really irrelevant, right? And in some types of composition, most of them actually, you just make the melody with babble. Most people do that when they're writing pop songs. They make the melodies like blah 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 blah, blah, and then they put up some random lyrics that will fit into the melody, right? So lyrics are really relevant, and you know, there's a lot of very important art forms that have no lyrics at all, right? In music, like jazz and classical music, right? How would a pop critic write an interpretation of a Miles Davis? You know, you can't really do that with, there's no text, you know, to get that from. So, you know, you need to resort to a different strategy here. That is not a very good approach. And they do that because they're not very, there's a lack of self-worth or self-belief or like confidence in their own ability to judge what is happening musically, right? There's another very, very valid point here. Another valid point she makes is, that Dennis is making here about the Pitchfork reviews, is there's this use of very generic descriptions to like the vibe review that she mentions to try to create a network or references around that piece of object, which sometimes they don't relate to the object very much, right? So you start to bundle the thing you're reviewing with like trends that surround it, or, you know, bands that sound like it, trying to create this, like render a map of references for the reader, which, you know, I get it, you know, that's something that you know, might need to do as a way to position the reader in a certain environment, in a certain network. That's a very easy thing to do, really. But, you know, that band, you know, Tennis is not responsible for the trend of vibe music or whatever that reviewer is talking about, right? Tennis might fit into that category, whatever, but they are not that category. They shouldn't be treated as something that's subsumed by the category or by the things that are around it, right? The bands that sound like it, right? Like, I'm not responsible for bands sounding shitty, you know, because, you know, you associate those bands with me, right? So that's another valid point. Another really valid point, this misreading of personal experience and the song meaning, right? Like, there's always an implicit and personal meaning. You don't need to kind of try to decode the song, right? You don't need to say, hey, she's scoffing at tourists. She's making this point, right? You don't need to put agency into the artist. But they do that all the time. Criticism does that all the time as a way of creating intimacy with the artist, bridging a certain gap of intimacy that exists between an artist and audience, right? Giving context about the piece, you know. Sometimes a critic will research about it and see where it came from. But even if you do that, you know, there's a lot going on. You know, the mathematics behind, you know, a construction of a song, the mathematics between like receiving an output and putting it out as art are already so indirect and abstract, you know, that, you know, there's no way to kind of tell what's going on. Even if the artist says, hey, I was inspired by this, you can't see the result of that in the song very much. There's a sort of like, it's like a black box in a way, right? Something comes in, something crazy happens that you don't know what's happening, and then something else comes out. Finding out the middle here, trying to figure out what's happening in the middle is impossible. So you shouldn't do that. Okay. But there's a couple of points where I think she's wrong here. First of all, she assumes that she has some authority over her own work. Like, I don't think she does. I don't think she has any authority to say what her work is. And as a critic, that's the position I think most people should take. If you're a critic, you should say, hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think your work is. I'm having an experience here. You have no relation to it, right? So death of the author, completely, absolutely, annihilation, right? So the author has no part in your experience of what that music is. Because if they did, all criticism would be great. The author would go and say, hey, my music is great. I did this. It's tremendous. It's the best thing ever, right? And you would go, hey, the artist is saying that. Maybe I should listen to them, right? I don't think that is the point. And she even mentions it here, like the artist is living in this echo chamber, right? And because their experiences are, the output of their experiences are unknown even to themselves, I would argue. So as a critic, your position is, hey, you're entitled to your opinion about your own art, but that is not what your art is, right? And the second point is that what she's doing here with this text is criticism. She is doing criticism. What she's doing here is engaging in her work so as to assert meaning into it. So criticism is the whole community of people, everything that happens in public that gives a certain meaning over that piece of art. If you are debating, creating discourse around your own record, you're just trying to create a critique of your own record, basically. You're just trying to create, and that's what releases are, really. If you look into like PR agencies, what they are doing is constructing a sort of mini critique that tries to tell you the position of the artist, what the artist think that works is, right? And why that's great, right? The release is that. It's a positive self-review in a way, which is a piece of criticism. So criticism is this sort of public scorekeeping of what an artwork is, right? We're all like, we have this game, this public explicit game of consent, of like reaching a consensus, right? And we're trying to do it together. I have this opinion, you have another one, we push it against one another, we try to keep score of who's doing better to figure out the description of that work. And at some point, we start to reach a rigid kind of formulation, which is what that work actually is, right? So criticism, in a way, is kind of objective. It is an objective collective description of something, right? And she's engaging in it by doing this here. Criticism is just this all-enveloping kind of assignment of meaning to artworks. And I would argue that she's also, I'm also against her. I think she's wrong in the rant against the rating system. I think that's the best thing that Pitchfork has ever implemented, that kind of a extremely precise rating system. And we can talk about like the grading of music and what function that has, because music is not a sport, it's not a competition, and there's not a single scale that music is working with, right? There's no single spectrum of like this reached, it's not like an exam where you can be like very good in it or very bad in it. There's no single criteria for defining what it is, right? Because a song might be in a certain context extremely good, in another context extremely bad, right? Like you wouldn't play Beethoven on a party that you're DJing at, right? Because that context, it would be terrible. At the same time, you wouldn't play like reggaeton in a concert space because maybe in that context it wouldn't work out, right? So there's a relationship of context that you need to pay attention to, and there's also many categories of grades that are layered upon each other, so that rating is really kind of crazy in that sense, and I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, the rating creates a sort of stable kind of point to come back to. It kind of homogenizes everything that you're saying into a sort of numerical form, which will then kind of cast a shadow over the writing in a very particular and very interesting way, Okay, so it kind of creates a subtlety the writing. It is a form of, it transforms the writing very much. So it creates a kind of a shade over the text that you're writing that's very useful for the critic. And there's many ideologies to it, right? So at some point she said that her record got, in her later review in Paste, they said, what did it say? The record is not as good as the previous one, but the previous one got a lower rating from Paste. That's because, Paste is not an entity. The entity is the reviewer, of course, right? She probably got reviewed by two different people, right? And even if it was the same person, that opinion might have changed. Opinions are not fixed in stone. So there's that one ideology about that. Another ideology is the kind of like Scaruffi. I don't know if you know Scaruffi, but like this kind of perfectionist ideology of the grading system, in which nothing is ever 10, ever, right? Centeno is kind of like that in a way too, but he gives a couple tens, but not as like couple, like 2 or 3 every decade or something like that, which implies that like there is a perfection in music to achieve, and there's the like objective ladder that is comparing one record to another. That perspective is a little bit crazier. I don't get into that shit, but that is another possible conception that I think is interesting, as at least for the reviewer themselves. It's interesting for a reviewer to have such a strict system of evaluation, I would say, right? That's also why I think like aggregate websites like Rate Your Music are interesting, and Metacritic, websites that aggregates various ratings from everyone or major outlets. They can tell you kind of like, they create a certain medial point between all the criticisms. They work as this kind of platform for the objectiveness of that record, right? Because they put together everything that has been said about it, right? In a sense. Okay, so but where's the criticism? Where is the authority of criticism to say, hey, your record is shit, right? Who gives them that authority? Okay, what is their point of view? How does, what puts people in that position? How can you be so evil, right? So as to say, hey, this work that you spend your last couple of years doing, terrible, trash can, it isn't worth anything, give up on your dreams. It gives them the authority to do that. Okay, so I think that kind of there's a kind of a common ground between various critical positions that we can find. And I use like a scale of Kantianness to kind of explore it here a little bit, which is that I think everyone who's a critic believes that criticism is a form of constructive mediation. So we'll get to the kind of define what that is, right? So it's a form of mediation between a work and a listener. So you are in between them, right? In a way that constructs in the sense of you are constructing what that record is, right? You mediate the relationship of a listener and a record by inventing what that record is. So you are using your power to kind of create this mediation that is constructive, it's additive to what a record is, right? So after you review a record, there is more to that record than there was before your review, right? And then people can kind of explore that too. They can explore the record as it was, they can explore their own perspective on the record, and they can explore what you added on top of that record, right? So that's one thing. Most people believe that's the case. And it is, as we said last session, kind of justified hallucination in a way. So how can we fit that into the Kantian kind of critique of judgment position, right? First of all, there are some Kantian affirmations of what judgment is are kind of in resonance with this thesis. One of them is the idea of there being a free play between imagination and understanding, which is this notion that, the reception of artworks would, you would kind of, there's a structure that's in play, which is the structure of your perception, but there's also a structure of freedom. There's a degree of freedom that you have with your own perception and cognition, right? So you will accept some stuff, you will not accept some stuff. You will discriminate against the elements that are coming towards you, right, in your aesthetic perception. And you do that in music by creating what I call a mnemonic sandbox. So like imagine a sandbox, like a video game, a sandbox. a thing that has nothing inside of it, and you start putting objects into it, right? You do that specifically through your memory. So you start to you bring in memories, stuff the music will recall, will evoke in you memories, relations, correlations between, cultural markers and, stuff that you lived yourself personally and stuff that that record corresponds with, like socially. And you start putting that into that sandbox, right? And filling it up, right? So you're kind of like building this Lego world within that kind of empty space. There's also like some kind of fixed, like hard data within that, but we'll talk about that in a second. Another thing that is kind of a content that we can take from that is this idea of a vital import, which is from that Suzanne Langer text that I sent you guys as a reading. So Suzanne Langer has this kind of concept of an artwork having a certain sprezzatura, having a certain, like a je ne sais quoi, let's say, like something that's within it, which is derived from the actual life as a form. And the form is a living thing as well, right? So there's something in the work that creates imports, like little packages, containments of vitality, of life. That's a Kantian, kind of like Kantian idea that we can take and input into this idea of criticism as constructive mediation, right? So these vital imports, they are universally accessible. Everyone can take a look at the record and see them, right? But we take them, we separate them with our individual kind of life, right? So our memories are part of that, right? So when we kind of see a work of art, like a piece of record, everyone's seeing the same thing, more or less, because we have the same kind of perceptual apparatus, but we're taking different kind of vital containments. We're taking little pieces of it, which are different. And this creates what I called Kant neutral perspectives in relation to criticism. So this universally accessible import is transcribed and articulated very differently, individually, through our own capacity to articulate them and through our own kind of life world, right? We have a life world of our own that kind of creates this whirlwind. Things will pass through it and become something else. That means that people will have different tastes, right? People will have different ideas of what's good and bad. And taste will also, like, if we are Bourdieuian enough, taste will also have its own kind of degrees and scales and contexts, right? So taste itself, there's a sort of a meta taste, right? We talked about that last session. At the same time, because that access to that work is universal, there's a sort of an agreeableness to taste. So there are records which are unlikable. I will say that you will only like them if you pretend that you are liking them, and people pretend all the time. That's another piece of thing about music, right? People pretend that they like stuff. You might also do that all the time without knowing it, right? You're pretending that you're liking something because you feel like, it awards you some sort of grace. It puts you in it creates distinction in relation to other people, or creates belonging in relation to certain groups, right? But there is a certain kinds of music are unlikable, I'll say. And there are certain kinds of music which are, you need to pretend that you don't like it, okay? So there's two spectrums, there's a spectrum here, right? So certain stuff is like, it's just good, right? Is here. Certain stuff is just bad. Now, for you to recognize which is which, there's a whole spectrum here in which you might be positioned differently, right? You might say something that is like unlikable is actually, you're like, I can kind of get it, right? You can kind of be around here. Or you can say, hey, I love this thing that's unlikable. There's a spectrum of likability around sort of this official taste, right? So, and the position of the critic is one of what I call here critical inferentialism. So you're trying to predict what is within the artwork, what is the universal quality of it, through the position of other people, and being a tie between the position of all those people. So we're trying to find the solid ground, the solid, like deontic, let's say, the deontological foot in a very malleable, very contextual space of likability, right? So you're trying to find a center for a certain aesthetic like perspectivism, right? By setting yourself into a sort of very objective, settled spectrum of what is liked and what is hated, which is there. It's objective, right? You know what is liked and what is hated. That's like a given in a given scenario, right? So you have to kind of create this kind of inferential debate, or this inferential kind of discovery of what the object is through the comparison of different perspectives and your own experience of it, of course. Which it could be kind of approximated to Kant's notion of an agreeable judgment. So Kant has a notion that, judgments are subjective, but they aim at universality. So you are doing your own opinion of a record, of course, but you are aiming at an opinion that everyone can recognize as the correct opinion, or that, resonates with the actual universality of that record in a way that kind of, it fits, right? It creates there's a fit between your opinion and the object somehow, right? Even if the person disagrees with you. There's that, it's kind of Kant neutral. And there's a sort of also like a, what I call like a cognition of the eventual, which is like when you listen to a lot of records, or you can do that with literature too, like when you read a lot of like novels, you kind of develop a cognition for what could happen in a novel, right? And also in life, right? Like if you read a lot of novels, you kind of you apply that novel to your life in such a way that you can kind of predict what people are going to say, because you have so much kind of test trials through the conversations that you've read in novels, right? That you can you develop a certain cognition for what might happen, which is being smart, basically. That's intelligence. That's why education is so important, actually, and reading and listening to having art forms in your life, which they create kind of trials for what life is, right? There's mini laboratories where you can live without being living, right? So you're living through the eyes of others. And when you live actual life, you have a sort of way of knowing what might or might not happen, right? Or what someone might or might not say. So you can kind of predict a little bit, right? And you can kind of start thinking about it before it happens, right? So if you read a lot of novels, you become really good as a conversationalist, it tends to be, or as a theater writer, Same thing for like visuals in paintings. You get a sort of sense for what goes well together, right? Or what kind of words are kind of more harmonious, right? In music, that also happens. And that also is applied not only to life itself, but to other artworks. So when you listen to a lot of music, when you do criticism a lot, you start to develop this depuration of what the artwork is in such a way, you become kind of like an AI in a sense. You are trained to know how an artwork can be expanded, right? Where can it go? What can it do? Where would it belong? How would other people answer to it? You start to kind of develop a cognition of that, even if you're not aware of that, because you're doing it so much. You're kind of training yourself like a robot in a way. Like you're listening to so many records, you're writing about them so much that you kind of know, there's some pathways here, there's some things that might happen, so you develop a cognition for what is eventually a good work of art and a bad work of art also, right? It's kind of like a accidentability, let's say. Like there's a certain, you're not a prophet, of course, you won't know, but you kind of know, you kind of sense it, right? Sometimes you'll listen to a record and you go like, this is derivative, right? In 5 seconds. Why is that? It's because you realize like there's a texture in there, there's a sort of shape in there, there's sort of the way that the musicians are positioning themselves, right? There's a certain, maybe the album cover, all of that is amounting to 5 seconds of your perception going like, this is kind of shit, right? Sometimes you go like, wow, this is bad, this is good. And sometimes you go like, this is weird. This kind of messes me up a little bit. Maybe I should listen for more time, right? So developing that cognition is also kind of like one of the appeals of criticism, I would say, and one of the things that are kind of Kant neutral about criticism, let's say. And some aspects of criticism, of this general idea of criticism, are also kind of negative, let's say. So criticism can involve very hard data. So some stuff about artworks, about music, are objective. They're formally objective in a way that I guess Kant would maybe have a problem with. Like some people will have the same experience of some things because they're like mathematics, basically, or because there's a sort of let's say, an archetypal symbolism, a very old symbolism within, that piece of art, right? That, you cannot escape from. And if you do escape from, you're wrong, basically. You might be wrong as a critic, right? Another thing is what I call the heteronomy of heteronomy of the work of art, so the opposite of the autonomy of it. So the work of art has some, conditions. It involves certain conditionings that are outside of the work of art. So there's a material substratum, there's a basis in conceptual ideas, there's a rationality in terms of, association and magnetization between people. So people will magnetize art with their taste, right? They will pollute the object with their taste. If you listen to if you see people who you don't like listening to certain musical objects, they will pollute that object with their taste. That is a given. There's a fact. And also, like, some works of art are very tied to specific materialities because people are constrained by, their capacity to invent some stuff, right? So, if you listen to, I don't know, some ethnographic recordings of, I don't know, the gamelan, that is shaped by, the reception of the gamelans for hundreds of years in, Western civilization. The kinds of materials the gamelan is made out of, this sort of conceptual embedding of the gamelan. What does it mean for that culture, for that community, right? Those are facts of the work of art that if you ignore, you're kind of wrong about it, right? So there's some objective data there. And the way the work of art intersects with life itself, the material conditionings, political conditionings, right? So yeah, and also there is an element of some ineffability, and we'll need to admit to that before we start being a critic, right? Admit to the ineffability of art, right? In the sense that the work will never be fully drained or fully explained, nor it can be like pinned down, as it's kind of coming from somewhere at some point. At some point you don't have a like full power over it. You will explain it, and to explain it well, you can assume you need to assume that assume that is correct, right? Otherwise you kind of lose yourself. And this is not like a endpoint, right? The problem with the romantic kind of perspective is that this is an endpoint. It's like, oh, music is ineffable. There's nothing to be said after that, right? This is the most like one of the most like flattening, kind of like, in the sense of like destroying criticism too. Is like, oh, it's just, oh, this is transcendent. When you like something so much, you just go like, oh, this is just unbelievable. There's nothing I can say about this, right? Like, sure, but that's such an uncreative perspective at the end of the day. This is such a like is like I have a friend who calls it monotheism of the life world. So it's like it creates a solid block. It's like Heidegger's like that in a way. It's like, oh, it's just the unveiling. It's the unveiling, right? It's not the unveiling. There's a lot of things going on that you can talk about, and talking about distinguishing it a little bit. It is powerful. It is ineffable at some point, but ignore that. Talk about it as if it wasn't, and then you will find out that there's more to construct over it, apart from just like, oh, this is great, right? You will find out that you can talk about it. You can create little connections. You can kind of go into the minutia of it and find a little bit of an ecology that's living there, right? And there's also like this kind of like, yeah, there's an instrumentality to art as well. So you can use art as well, right? There's a sort of, the art, music also, even if it doesn't seem like it, is a model of reality. And in this sense is always like kind of political, and it can be used for certain respects, right? It's always like a soteriology art, right? It's always something that's modifying the world, even if by providing you with an image of what the world could be. And that happens in music too, all the time, even if it's non-descriptive, even if it's non-pictorial, that happens in music too. And this is another kind of narrative aspect of criticism. So criticism, judgment, aesthetics, experience, I'm talking about a lot of different kind of very philosophical terminology. We can maybe expand on it a little bit if we have like a couple of minutes for questions and concerns. I will talk about a little bit more about each of those and those concepts throughout the seminar after we talk about your each of the assignments. But for now, that's it. And for next class, the assignment that you guys have, since I kind of started it already, I want a little blurb. So it's a little blurb, a little paragraph, maybe a paragraph or two, about two records. One will be Beach Boys Smile, okay? And another will be a record of your choice, which I recommend be one of the records you already kind of started blurbing, right? So we will expand on it, and then you will expand even more in the third session, okay? So I want to do that because I also want to compare your perspectives, your ways of writing about a single record, and because I think this record is specifically very fruitful in terms of what can be written about it. Okay, so there's a lot in it. I mean, I already mentioned it. We talked about Beach Boys a little bit. There's been so much writing about it. There's also a challenge about that. So when everything has been said about it, something already, how can you guys say something different, right? And there is to be said, like there's the backstory, there's the actual record, the sounds, there's many like instances of every song in here, and there's everything you can imagine you can talk about when it comes to this record. There's the context of it, there's America, there is circus, there is comedy, there is theater, there's everything you want to know. There's classical music too. So I think that's a good object to kind of create a sort of crystal of many different perspectives and kind of showcase like this kind of agreeableness. What can we find that is common between us all about when we're kind of reviewing that record, right? And in this case, I want you to give me your honest opinion, right? So this is your critical take. It's not an impersonation. Your critical take about this record, and then one more of your choice. That's the assignment. And it can be just a little paragraph, okay? Maybe, I don't know how many words that would be, but one paragraph or two. It's what we call a blurb in like the market of freelancing about music. A blurb is a little description or something like something you put on the back of a record to describe it, right? A little 2-paragraph thing. There's a chat here. Senza, you can't build effective roads into writing criticism from absolute conjectures, very much. Yet this does happen commonly when trying to do philosophical writing. Good point. Does it though? Because I feel like many times in philosophical writing, when we reach to that point, I feel like is when we reach like the ceiling of the creative capacity of the text, which is why I really like philosophies that open like pathways without closing them into these absolute conjectures. Like Michel Serres does that a lot. Jason Mohai, a professor here, he is great at doing that. All his books are like creating this schema of like terms and then going just a little bit into it and then not becoming this very generic, this kind of general, kind of universal position at any moment, right? Just going a little bit into it and then change your modulate your key, right? Yeah, Senza again. Have a question?
Yeah, I just had like a question based on what you were stating on taste and pretty much this approach of understanding criticism from the deontological coordinates
Yes.
put on by Kantian, because by Kant, since not only it's a good historical reference, but it does permeate quite a bit the way we
Yes.
assimilate the idea of judgment and critique, right? And how to differentiate both of those things. That's why
Yeah.
Kant, even so, he like 300 years ago or 400 years ago makes this distinction.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I think
um,
what the idea that we have of what judgment is, like commonsensical, is Kantian, very
mhm.
much.
I mean, if, yes, at least for me, as someone who is from a colonized country, it most definitely is. And living from the brainwashing of monotheism and all of that, we can go on a big rabbit hole, affirmating that we think that way. But my question is, this is taken up from another seminar that I recently had with Sean Tatel from the Manhattan Art Review, which I do think it's a great art critic.
Yeah, good art critic. I
Yeah.
like it.
And we were talking about making this difference on when one speaks of art criticism and the way you are positing music criticism, for example, in the way that in art, among critics, there's like this fetish of discussing all the time, even so, like as if people need that, about telling always going back to this quote unquote argument that art is dying or the art market is dying. Yet it's not the same thing happening within the musical form of art criticism, right? Because no music critic is talking that music is dying. or if he is doing that, he is incorrect. But
So
this drove us to a conclusion of maybe putting into perspective which can be the most effective, most determinate coordinates to exercise criticism within arts nowadays. And I was thinking, personally, I tried not to jar myself up in this idea of thinking what's good or what's bad, because it's kind of obsolete. It's indeterminate. Going back to the Kantian stuff, it generates indeterminacy when we speak about good or bad taste. But it's not the same if we speak about dominance and subordination, because I do see more objectively that there are dominant forms of art and more subordinate forms of art. In that sense, will you say that within music criticism specifically, in a way, isn't that the music critic shouldn't be like some form of gatekeeper or of tastemaker?
I think so. I think in a sense it's the opposite of art criticism very much like nowadays, where art criticism it ceased being critical very much, is mostly like descriptive. If you read like art forum or whatever, like I wrote to places art criticism, and I wrote music criticism as well. And the editing process is really, really different. In art criticism, they try to get rid of your personal judgment the most as possible. It is not about judgment, it's about describing the piece. And trying to contextualize it in a sense. So it ceased being critical. In music is the opposite. It's mostly about saying if it's good or bad. That's why you don't give a rating. Imagine if art forum gave ratings to exhibitions.
Like Sean does that.
And then,
Like
yeah,
Sean kind of does that, but it's
and
because he tries to go beyond that principle within formal art criticism.
yes. So Sean tries. He takes this kind of populist appeal of music criticism and tries to put it into art criticism. That's basically his project, right? He's trying to collapse these two categories, which I think is really useful. I think art criticism should be doing that, actually. Like no one's interested in no one would read a description of an exhibition. Why would you do that? That's just for the artist, for the gallery, for the art system, for the reviewer. That's the people who are getting money out of it. No one's reading it, right? Because they are interested in judgment. They're interested in finding out what is good taste, what is bad taste, what kind of taste I have, what kind of taste they have, how can I fit my taste into theirs, what sort of arena am I belonging as a spectator, right? So what you said in the beginning that you thought art critics were kind of addicted to this discussion.
What I'm trying to ask is isn't it like a more effective road onto music criticism specifically to go into it from the perspective of a gatekeeper, of trying to actually gatekeep?
Interesting because yes, in a sense they all do a little bit of that, but also you are trying to open the gates in a sense too, right? You're kind of creating, you're serving you're in the service industry in the sense of you're serving people with possible things that they might like, right? You are doing this mediation, you are being the algorithm in a sense, right? You're being the
Exactly.
yeah, but so in a sense you are gatekeeping because there's a certain sort of hiding and revealing game that you're playing in a sort of way. You're also like the opposite of that. You're opening gateways for musicians to go out into the audience, right? And I think this is interesting. And it's something I debate myself too about myself. Like I sometimes feel like I like a record so much that I don't want to write about it. That I
Yes,
like
just
first of
for
all,
myself.
yes, like first of all, because I want to keep it to myself. Second of all, because writing is work. And when you kind of position yourself into that realm, you kind of lose, there's a certain, the naivete that Irina mentioned, there's a certain naivete that you lose. Um, you know, Sometimes I'm listening to stuff and I don't want to I don't want my taste to be revealed completely. I want my taste to be transparent because then you lose your kind of the sort of the mysterious quality of it. There's a certain mysterious quality in having a taste that's kind of for you, right? Of course, you might reveal everything that you like, and people will still assume that you like something else, hidden, like you're hiding something, right? You will still assume that, but I sometimes feel like it is useful to have this reservoir that's taken for you, like it's hidden, because it also powers the other things that you're publishing in a sense, right? It creates an aura into it, right? It kind of illuminates it in a different sense. There's some chats here. Jason is awesome. Should we read something by Kant that would be useful for next assignment? The text by Suzanne Langer that I put is very much like a extremely Kantian and very much like a better, let's say, that's kind of like sacrilegious, but I think a better Kantianism, a Kantianism for the 20th century, 20th and 21st century. Highly recommend that. It was just, if you didn't read it, it's like 90 pages, something like that. That book is tremendous, called Filling in Form. It's like a mix of Kant and Bachelard in a way. So if you like those two, and it's really, really well written. Yeah, and she's kind of a bit forgotten in a sense. I don't know a lot of people who read her or read her or give her in like lectures and stuff. So I'd like to change that. We can also read Kant if you want, but I think Kant is so fucking boring in a sense, and people kind of know.
Yes.
Kind of, I feel like people kind of know it already. People like you probably read a bit of it in other classes, and maybe you kind of know the basics of Kant. Irina, yes, I think art criticism is more like PR, and agree that it's more about descriptions. Yeah, it's more like a PR. It's more like a release, right? And it's the reason why you get paid way more in art criticism too. I don't know if you know that, but because you are creating a job of marketing, right? You will be invited to, if you do art criticism, you will be invited by the galleries to the exhibitions, to everything. They will give you food. They will give you a lot of the outlets will pay a lot of money, like 500, 400 per piece. And in music, not really. Music is just like, it's seen as a form of blogging. It's seen as personal opinion. It doesn't help the musician sometimes. It doesn't help at all sometimes, right? So they don't pay as much because it's not, the industry is different, the industry behind it, right? Other questions or concerns or I don't know, jokes or confessions or stories, fables, I don't know, anything you want to talk about? Assignment 2 is clear for everyone, right?
They have to be like 2 records necessarily, right?
Yes. One of them necessarily Smile by Beach Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Pick which of the smiles you want, because there's like 5 versions of that. There's Smiley Smiley, Smiley Sessions, Smile the record, and there's some versions you can pick. Because I'm more interested in the phenomenon than the record itself. And the other is a record of your choice, which I would say try to pick one that you want to talk more about for the longer assignment that will come afterwards, right? So we can kind of open it up. If you want to start from the one-liner that you did, that's great. So 2 blurbs, 1 or 2 paragraph each of them. Okay.
Can you
And
upload, Romulo, can you
Yeah.
upload the presentation to the drive?
Yes, I can for sure. Absolutely. Great,
Thank you.
great. Yeah, if any of you have questions, concerns, anything, just email. I'm always available. I will try to get feedback for the people I didn't talk about in this class, and I'll also try next class to talk less and to address everyone's and to kind of get you guys into a sort of a more like fertile conversation. Okay. So see you. We have 2 weeks, by the way, right? We're doing the seminar every 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from now, 17th of August. See you guys then. Oh, there's also some text. I put some text in the folder too that you can check out for next week. I might change. Let me try to put it back again. Where is it? I closed it. Oh, okay. Never mind. I changed. I might change some text after this week. I'll let you know. I'll send a reminder like a week before, probably next Monday, not this Monday, the other one, that for the text that is there and for the assignment and everything, okay? And so that you guys keep up with it. And that's it. Thank you very much. It was cool.
Thank
See you
you.
guys in 2 weeks, okay?
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Have a good one.